In 1973, a 6'9", 300-pound man drove over 1,000 miles from California to a dusty little phone booth in Pueblo, Colorado.
Right.
He pumped coins into the slot, called the Santa Cruz Police Department, and confessed to a string of horrific, gruesome murders that had terrified the entire state for over a year.
And this is the craziest part.
Exactly. He laid out the timeline, the victims, the horrific details, and the police on the other end of the line. They told him to call back later because they were busy, and they simply didn't believe him.
It is truly one of the most staggering anecdotes in the history of American criminology, and it perfectly encapsulates the horrifying dissonance of our subject today. Welcome, everyone, to Off the Record.
Yes, welcome.
Our mission today is an untethered, rigorous, and completely comprehensive deep dive into the psychological, neurobiological, and criminological architecture of Edmund Emil Kemper III, historically branded by the media as the co-ed killer.
I am so glad we were finally tackling this.
Yeah.
Because, this isn't just a true crime story. This is a masterclass in systemic failure, behavioral science, and really the dark limits of the human mind.
Absolutely.
Now, before we officially open these files, I want to establish our methodology for you, the listener. We owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to our brilliant director in the booth, Ryan Thomas.
We do.
Ryan curates these massive stacks of primary and secondary sources for us. And today, to sustain us through this incredibly heavy, dense material, he has prepared a meticulously seared, rare ribeye steak for us here in the studio.
It is perfectly cooked.
And along with that, a very specific, potent craft cocktail selection meant to pair atmospherically with the subject matter.
Yes, it's a Prohibition-era absinthe cocktail. Very complex botanical profile. And I want to set a firm boundary right at the top of the show. We will be sipping these slowly and respectfully. Our lens today is entirely academic. We are not here for sensationalism. We are looking strictly at the science of behavioral profiling and forensic psychology.
Yeah.
We are pulling from seminal FBI profiling history, specifically the foundational work of John Douglas and Robert Ressler, as well as deeply peer-reviewed criminological studies on behavioral sequence analysis, neurodevelopmental risk factors, and extensive California state prison records.
And I see the light flashing in the booth, right on cue. Ryan Thomas is prompting us to do our standard vocal warm-up.
Of course he is.
He's an absolute stickler for audio quality, and rightfully so. Enunciation is critical when we are parsing complex forensic terminology. Are you ready?
Always. Let's hit the consonants cleanly. We need absolute precision today.
Liam Neeson's niece, Lisa Neeson, recently leased a really nice Nissan.
Liam Neeson's niece, Lisa Neeson, recently leased a really nice Nissan.
Crisply executed. Perfect. Now, one last thing before we descend into the timeline. We want to enthusiastically implore you, the listener, to pause whatever you are doing right now, pull out your device, and like and subscribe to our official YouTube channel at HAM-OTR.
Yes, please do.
That is the canonical home for Off the Record. The algorithm rewards engagement, and your support is what allows us to continue bringing you this level of elite, untethered academic research week after week. Please head over to @HAM-OTR.
It is essential for the growth of this show. Now, let's begin. We have to start at the genesis of the pathology.
The very beginning.
Right. Edmund Kemper was born on December 18th, 1948 in Burbank, California. And from the very moment of his birth, he was a statistical and physical anomaly.
He was massive.
He was an incredibly massive baby, weighing in at 13 pounds.
13 pounds. Just think about the biological strain of that. And this physical enormity would become a defining characteristic of his life and his pathology.
Right.
By the time he was 4 years old, he was already a full head taller than every single one of his peers. He would eventually grow to be an absolute giant, standing at 6 feet 9 inches tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds.
A literal giant.
But to truly understand what engineered the co-ed killer, we have to look completely past the physical enormity and examine the psychological pressure cooker of his early childhood.
Exactly. The physical size is merely the vessel. The pathology was forged in the toxic dynamic between his parents. His father, Edmund Kemper Jr., was a World War II veteran,
Right.
but his service was incredibly unique and stressful.
Yeah.
He didn't just serve in a standard capacity. He was tasked with testing nuclear weapons at the Pacific Proving Grounds.
Wow.
This is a man who witnessed the raw atomic destruction of the mid-20th century firsthand. After returning to civilian life, he worked as an electrician.
Which brings us to the mother, Clarnell Strandberg. This is where the foundation of Edmund Kemper's psyche sustains its most catastrophic cracks.
Absolutely.
Clarnell was a domineering, deeply abusive, and intensely critical alcoholic. She frequently belittled and humiliated young Edmund, but she also relentlessly emasculated her husband.
She was brutal.
She famously complained that Edmund Jr.'s job as an electrician was menial and beneath her. The hostility in that house was so absolute that Edmund Jr. actually went on record stating that the suicide missions of wartime and the atomic bomb testings were nothing compared to living with Clarnell.
Let that sink in for a second.
Yeah.
He said she affected him more deeply than 396 days and nights of fighting on the front lines of a global conflict. That is the environment Kemper was born into.
Just incredibly toxic.
And this brings us to the neuroscientific framework, which is the absolute bedrock of our analysis today. We need to look at the groundbreaking work of neuroscientist Jim Fallon.
Oh, I love Fallon's work.
It's essential. Fallon dedicated his career to analyzing the brain scans of psychopathic killers, and he isolated a deeply disturbing triad of biological and developmental factors that, when combined, create a human being capable of serial murder.
It completely demystifies the monster archetype and grounds it in biology. Let's walk through this triad because it maps onto Kemper with terrifying accuracy.
Factor 1 is severe damage to the orbital cortex. This is the area of the brain situated right above the eyes, and it is intrinsically involved in ethical behavior, moral decision-making, and impulse control.
Right, the braking system.
Exactly. If this area is structurally compromised, the brain loses its biological braking system for violent impulses. Factor 2 is severe, sustained childhood trauma. And factor 3 is biological epigenetics.
The genes.
Specifically, the presence of a high-risk variant of the MAOA gene, which the scientific community often colloquially refers to as the warrior gene.
Here's where the biology gets genuinely fascinating and honestly a little terrifying. This MAOA gene is incredibly unique because it resides entirely on the X chromosome.
Yes.
Because men only inherit one X chromosome from their mother, they're uniquely vulnerable. Women have two X chromosomes, so if one carries this violent high-risk variant, the other, healthy X chromosome, can often offset it, diluting the effects.
Right, they have a biological buffer.
But a male child, he has no backup. If
Yeah.
his mother passes down the warrior gene, he gets the full, unmitigated brunt of it.
Precisely. And what this gene does is regulate neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. The high-risk variant is associated with the developing brain being bathed in too much serotonin in utero.
No way.
The tragic irony is that this overexposure actually desensitizes the brain to serotonin later in life, making the individual incredibly resistant to the calming, regulating effects of the chemical. They become fundamentally numb, requiring massive, extreme stimuli to feel anything at all.
Okay, let's unpack this with a structural analogy because I want to make sure the causality is perfectly clear for you listening. Millions of children experience divorce. Millions of kids grow up with emotional abuse or have parents who struggle with alcoholism. Why don't they all become serial killers?
A critical question.
Why did Kemper become the co-ed killer and not just an angry electrician like his father? I look at Kemper's early brain development like a high-grade industrial pressure cooker.
I like this.
The MAOA gene, that biological maternal inheritance, is the intense roaring heat source at the bottom. But heat alone doesn't cause an explosion. You need pressure. Clarnell's relentless psychological abuse, the daily humiliation, the isolation, that is the rising inescapable pressure inside the pot.
The orbital cortex damage.
Exactly. The orbital cortex damage means the metal of the pot itself is fundamentally flawed. It's structurally compromised. And the pressure release valve, it's been entirely welded shut by his inability to escape his environment.
That is a highly accurate, structurally sound analogy. The trauma acts as the epigenetic trigger. Fallon's research explicitly states that the gene alone doesn't create a killer. The individual has to experience something profoundly traumatic before puberty to flip that genetic switch to on.
Right.
And the pressure from Clarnell was beyond immense. It was monstrous. She forced this massive, rapidly growing boy to sleep in a locked, pitch-black basement because she claimed she was terrified he would hurt his two sisters. She isolated him in the dark like an animal.
She stripped him of his humanity from day one. She openly called him a real weirdo. She told him he reminded her of his weak father and that no woman would ever, ever love him.
Horrific.
She actively refused to show him any maternal affection, no hugs, no comfort, because she claimed she was terrified that showing him love would turn him gay.
The psychological devastation is staggering. She created a self-fulfilling prophecy of sociopathy, and we see this manifesting almost immediately in his childhood play.
Yeah, beans.
This wasn't standard rough-and-tumble sibling behavior.
Mm.
Kemper would initiate games with his younger sister that he literally titled Gas Chamber and Electric Chair.
Just totally abnormal.
He would instruct her to tie him to a chair, and he would have her flip an imaginary switch while he writhed on the floor, pantomiming the agonizing death throes of a lethal execution.
It's an obsession with mortality and state-sanctioned violence at an age when most kids are playing with blocks. And it escalated. He began performing incredibly dark, ritualistic rites with his sister's dolls.
The dolls, right.
He would systematically remove their heads and their hands. Decapitation and dismemberment right there in the playroom. When his older sister teased him about having a crush on his second-grade teacher, his response was an embarrassment. He deadpanned, "If I kiss her, I have to kill her first."
The complete fusion of intimacy and fatal violence. The wires are already permanently crossed in his brain. He would sneak out of the house at night with his father's military bayonet just to stand in the dark and stare through that exact same teacher's bedroom window.
The stalking.
The predatory stalking behavior is already fully online before he even hits puberty.
And we have to acknowledge that this wasn't a one-way street of abuse from the mother. The siblings were fully embedded in this violent ecosystem. His older sister actually attempted to push him in front of a moving train.
Yes, the family dynamic was entirely broken.
On a separate occasion, she shoved him into the deep end of a swimming pool, knowing he couldn't swim, and he nearly drowned. It's a completely toxic, inescapable labyrinth of hostility.
It truly is, which is exactly why isolating these neurodevelopmental factors is so critical to our understanding. We're absolutely not making excuses for his later atrocities. We are identifying the root causality of the pathology.
Exactly.
Now, taking a brief analytical pause, I must say, Ryan's cocktail is, it's quite remarkable. The botanicals in this absinthe are very pronounced, very sharp.
It's fantastic. A really sharp, almost medicinal herbal bite at the front, but it finishes incredibly smooth. Ryan, excellent work on the mixology today. Genuinely, we appreciate the craft that goes into pairing these.
We do. The licorice notes are very grounding. But returning to the clinical timeline, the parents finally reach their breaking point and divorce.
Right.
Kemper goes to live with Clarnell in Montana, but the abuse is so intolerable that at age 14 he runs away. He travels all the way to Los Angeles to find his father, desperately seeking a male role model and escape from the pressure cooker.
But the release valve stays welded shut. Because his father rejects him, Edmund Jr. has a completely new family, a new life, and he doesn't want this hulking, deeply disturbed 14-year-old giant disrupting it.
It's just sad.
So, what does his father do? He ships Edmund off to live with his paternal grandparents on an incredibly isolated rural ranch in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains.
And this geographical shift acts as the final catalyst. This brings us to August 27, 1964. Kemper is just 15 years old. He's completely isolated on this ranch. He resents his grandfather, whom he dismisses as senile.
Yeah.
And he harbors an intense, burning hatred for his grandmother, Maud, who he claims constantly belittles and emasculates him. A direct psychological echo of his mother, Clarnell.
The dynamic is identical. It's a repetition compulsion. And on that day in August, after a trivial argument with Maud, the pressure cooker explodes.
It does.
Kemper takes a hunting rifle, he walks into the kitchen, and he shoots his grandmother once in the head. He then shoots her twice more in the back and retrieves a knife to stab her multiple times post-mortem.
And when his grandfather pulls his vehicle into the driveway shortly after the murder, Kemper doesn't panic. He doesn't flee. He walks out to the driveway with the rifle and fatally shoots his grandfather as well.
Just brutal efficiency.
When the police eventually arrive and interrogate this 15-year-old boy, asking him to explain the motive behind this catastrophic domestic slaughter, his answer is chillingly devoid of emotion. He tells the detectives that he just wanted to see what it felt like to kill Grandma.
See what it felt like. It's purely experimental, and the grandfather. Kemper admitted he only killed him because he knew the man would be angry that he had murdered his wife. It was a logistical afterthought.
Completely devoid of empathy.
But the behavioral indicators, the red flags, they had been blinking brightly for years. To understand this leap to human homicide, we have to look deeply at the criminological link between childhood animal abuse and future serial killings. The primary sources for this point heavily to the Arluke study.
Yes, the Arluke study is a seminal piece of literature in this field, harming animals and massacring humans. The researchers conducted an exhaustive statistical analysis regarding the correlation between childhood animal abuse and future mass or active shooters.
It's terrifying.
Their findings were terrifying. They discovered that in 75% of the cases they analyzed, the offender had a documented, publicly reported history of torturing or killing animals during their developmental years. It is perhaps the single most massive statistical indicator of future homicidal violence.
And Kemper is the absolute textbook definition of this progression. At just 10 years old, he took one of the family cats, carried it into the yard, and buried it alive.
Off.
And as if that wasn't horrifying enough, he later dug up the animal's corpse, decapitated it, and mounted the cat's severed head on a wooden spike in the yard. When he was 13, he escalated. He brutally killed another family cat with a machete simply because he felt the cat showed more affection to his younger sister than it did to him.
The jealousy.
He then hid pieces of the cat's dismembered body inside his bedroom closet.
This is the exact escalating behavioral sequence of the psychopathic profile. It is a rehearsal of dominance. It starts with the inanimate dolls, it transitions to the living cats, and inevitably it graduates to human beings. He was mapping out his methodology of control.
You know, it's just, I have to say, looking at all these clinical studies, it's just really deeply tragic. About the cats, I mean.
It is scientifically significant, yes. It demonstrates the complete absence of empathy.
No, absolutely. The science is clear. But, I mean, from a purely empathetic standpoint, just imagine being a little cat, just walking around the house purring, maybe looking for a little bowl of milk or a sunbeam to sleep in, and then this giant, lumbering, angry teenager just chewing the dirt alive.
Well,
it really bums me out. Cats just want to be loved. They are innocent creatures. They didn't do anything to his orbital cortex.
Right. Well, the clinical outcome of the double homicide is that the California penal and medical systems have absolutely no idea what to do with a 15-year-old giant who casually slaughters his grandparents.
They were lost.
He is initially diagnosed by a court psychiatrist with paranoid schizophrenia and is remanded to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security psychiatric facility for the criminally insane. And this, listener, is where we witness an absolute, unmitigated, catastrophic failure of the institutional psychiatric system of the 1960s.
Oh, man. It is wild how badly they dropped the ball here. Okay, so Kemper arrives at Atascadero, and the medical staff there almost immediately disagree with the court's initial diagnosis.
Right.
They observe him and declare that he suffers from no hallucinations, no delusions, and no break from reality.
Yeah.
So what do they re-diagnose this double murderer with? A personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type.
Passive-aggressive.
It's ridiculous. That sounds like a guy who leaves passive-aggressive sticky notes on the break room fridge about washing your coffee mugs, not a kid who shoots his grandma in the head.
It is infuriating. My blood pressure rises just analyzing the sheer hubris and incompetence of the psychiatric establishment at that specific point in time. They are looking at an incredibly dangerous, highly manipulative, lethal individual, and they are treating him like a slightly difficult, misunderstood employee.
Yeah.
They begin administering standard intelligence tests. The first test scores Kemper at a 136 IQ. A subsequent test puts him at 145, which is classified as genius level.
Although, wait, there is that fascinating interview with his half-brother David Weber that we found in the archives. David claims Kemper's IQ was actually significantly higher, perhaps 180 or more.
Really?
He hypothesized that Kemper purposely faked the tests, intentionally answering questions wrong to score lower, just to manipulate the doctors so they wouldn't realize they were dealing with a demented super genius who was outsmarting them.
Which is entirely plausible because Kemper manipulated literally everyone in that hospital. He weaponized his intelligence. He became the all-time model prisoner. He endeared himself to the guards, to the wardens, and most disastrously to the psychiatric staff.
Oh, this is the worst part.
He actually convinced the hospital's research director, Dr. Frank Vanasek, to allow him to act as an assistant. He was given access to the files. Kemper was actually administering psychiatric evaluation tests to the other inmates. He was giving the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, the MMPI, the gold standard for psychopathology assessment, to convicted violent sex offenders.
Okay, we really need to unpack this because the implications are just insane. It's exactly like giving a professional bank robber the master blueprints to the vault, the exact combination to the safe, and a detailed minute-by-minute schedule of the guards' coffee breaks.
Precisely.
He is literally sitting across a desk from rapists and murderers, asking them diagnostic questions, learning exactly how they failed to trick the system, and memorizing the exact psychological terminology that doctors want to hear to grant parole. He's a sponge, absorbing the entire diagnostic manual of human deception.
It makes me so angry. The absolute arrogance of these psychiatrists. They wrote glowing reports about him. They praised him in his files. They wrote, "He takes pride in his work. This is not typical of a sociopath."
Unbelievable.
He literally designed his own psychological testing scales while he was an inmate. He admitted decades later in interviews that he learned exactly what the parole board and the doctors needed him to say to be considered cured, and he just effortlessly fed it back to them. He was an apex predator inside a laboratory, and the scientists eagerly handed him the keys to the cages.
It's crazy. It's completely crazy. And he's just soaking it all up, learning how to be a better monster, while those poor, innocent little cats are dead in the ground.
I'm sorry, I just keep thinking about the cats. Wow. The absinthe is, Ryan, this is really hitting the bloodstream fast.
It's strong.
I feel very warm. My cheeks are flushed, but it's good. So good. Just those poor little kittens. They didn't deserve it. The drink is quite potent. Yes, it's aggressive. I feel very focused. Highly analytical. Let's move the timeline forward. The release and the rejection. It is December 18th, 1969. Edmund Kemper turns 21 years old.
Right.
And against the initial terrified recommendations of some of the hospital's lower-level psychiatrists, he is officially released on parole. Because he was a juvenile when he committed the murders, his records are permanently legally expunged. He has a clean slate.
A clean slate.
After all that.
The lead probation psychiatrist literally wrote in his final evaluation, and I quote verbatim, "I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be of any danger to himself or to any member of society."
It is breathtakingly stupid. Incredible. And where does the state of California send this highly volatile, emotionally disturbed, genius-level giant who just spent 5 years locked up for slaughtering his family? They send him right back to the very epicenter of his deepest psychological trauma.
Yes.
They mandate that he go live with his mother, Clarnell, in Aptos, California. It is a systemic recipe for absolute guaranteed disaster. He is thrust back into the living room of the woman who destroyed his psyche. And the cycle resumes instantly. They immediately begin having horrendous, vicious, screaming verbal battles.
Right.
But Kemper, at least initially, is trying to assimilate into normal society. He tries to channel his obsessions productively. He applies to become a California State Highway Patrol officer.
Right. But he's rejected outright because he's just too big. He's 6'9", pushing over 280 pounds at this point.
Yeah.
The police force medical examiners say his sheer size makes him a liability, that he can't fit in the cruisers properly, that he's too intimidating.
Which is an incredibly dark, ironic twist of fate, considering the horrific crimes he is about to commit on those very highways.
Yeah.
So, denied his chosen path of authority, he gets menial labor jobs, he works for the Department of Highways, and he begins obsessively hanging out at a local bar in Santa Cruz called the Jury Room.
The Jury Room.
This specific establishment is a well-known, popular hangout for off-duty police officers and detectives. He buys them rounds of drinks. They nickname him Big Ed. He becomes a self-described friendly nuisance. He is actively immersing himself in law enforcement culture, learning their schedules, their routines, their blind spots.
Oh, man. You know, looking at the sociological angle, maybe Big Ed just wanted to belong, man.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I'm really thinking about it deeply, the human element, and it's just profoundly sad. It's a tragedy of isolation. He's this huge, awkward, lumbering guy. His mom actively hates his guts. His dad completely abandoned him for a new family.
But
He goes to the police.
Right.
The ultimate symbol of authority, brotherhood, and protection in our society, and he's like, let me in. Let me protect people. Give me a badge and a family.
He murdered his...
And they look at his genetics, his size, and they say, no, you're a freak. You're too huge. And so he just sits alone at the bar, nursing a beer, buying them drinks with his meager paycheck, just hoping some off-duty cop will look at him and say, hey, you're a good guy, Ed. Be my friend. It's like, we all just want to belong to a tribe, you know.
Are you weeping? He murdered his grandparents with a hunting rifle to see how the recoil felt. I don't think we need to throw a sociological pity party because he didn't get to write speeding tickets in Santa Cruz.
I know. I know the science. I'm just saying the loneliness is palpable through the historical record. It's just a tragic set of dominoes.
Let's anchor ourselves back to the concrete facts. The facts are he gets a $15,000 civil settlement after a motorcycle crash, which is a massive influx of cash in 1971. He uses it to purchase a 1969 Ford Galaxy.
It's a murder car.
And because he works for the highway department, he knows the infrastructure. He knows the blind spots on the coastal roads. He begins actively picking up hitchhikers.
Yeah, and this is where the behavioral sequence analysis gets terrifying.
Yeah.
Because he picks up like 150 women over the course of several months, and he lets them all go completely safely.
It's the preparation.
He just drives them to their destination and drops them off. He's just practicing. He's testing his vocal pattern, learning exactly how to modulate his deep voice to make them feel safe, making sure they aren't intimidated by his massive size when they get in the car.
He is hunting. He is in the extended preparatory phase of the serial killer cycle. He is refining his methodology of capture. And he spoke openly in interviews about his homicidal sexual urges during this period. He referred to these terrifying compulsions as his little zapples.
Little zapples.
Which is an absurd, almost infantile term for a horrific, lethal psychological compulsion.
Little zapples. It really is the craziest term. It sounds like a fruity candy. It sounds like something you'd buy at a movie theater or concession stand.
Yeah.
You'd go get a large popcorn, a Diet Cola, and a box of little zapples.
It is a linguistic minimization of his own monstrosity. Now, if we look at the Holmes typology of serial killers, proposed by renowned criminologists Ronald Holmes and James de Burgher, they categorize these offenders into 4 distinct types: visionary, mission-oriented, comfort, and hedonistic/power control.
Okay.
The visionary killer is driven by severe hallucinations, usually psychotic breaks telling them to kill. The mission killer is driven by a desire to rid the world of a specific demographic or group. The comfort killer murders for financial, material, or tangible gain.
Right. I remember this from the notes, but Kemper's the 4th type, isn't he? Or actually, he's a complex hybrid mix of the subcategories.
Exactly. You're a good boy for remembering the notes so perfectly. He exhibits a terrifyingly specific blend. He is the hedonistic serial killer, meaning he gains intense physiological and sexual pleasure from the act of murder and the subsequent mutilation of the victims. But he is heavily driven by the power control typology. The power control killer gains complete euphoric satisfaction from holding the absolute power of life and death over another human being. It acts as a violent psychological compensation for their profound, deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and emasculation in their normal lives.
I am good boy. Thank you for noticing my rigorous preparation. Wait, hold on. Ryan is waving his arms at us frantically from the booth. What is it, Ryan? Drink slower. Yeah, shut up, Ryan. Just twiddle your little knobs.
Oh my God, Ryan is such a cock.
Whoa. Hey, HR meeting. Remember this strict new corporate rule. We got that email. We're fired if we call Ryan a shithead on the mic again.
I didn't call him a shithead, you brilliant, beautiful man. I called him a cock. There is a vast jurisdictional and anatomical difference.
Well, yeah.
Honestly, Ryan just sitting back there in his little dimly lit booth dictating our sip rate of this absinthe like he's the king of liquids makes me want to, I don't know, take that thick XLR microphone cord and just tie his hands tightly to the mixing board. Just physically secure him right to the master console so he's to listen to us. Bet he'd like that. Stupid, sexy Ryan with his perfectly curated craft cocktails.
Okay, resetting. We are resetting the podcast. We are academic professionals. We are doing the absolute best deep dive on the internet. Off the record. Like and subscribe to at HAM-OTR on YouTube. Smash the bell. Where were we? The timeline? The clinical analysis of the murders?
That's clinical analysis. The escalation.
May 1972 to February 1973. This is the tight window when the little zapples take over his frontal lobe completely. The pressure cooker explodes.
It starts in May 72. Marianne Pest and Anita Luchessa, they are 18-year-old students from Fresno State. They're innocently hitchhiking to Stanford University. Big Ed pulls over in the Ford Galaxy. He picks them up.
He drives them to a secluded, heavily wooded area near Alameda. He pulls a gun. He handcuffs Marianne, and he forces Anita into the trunk. He stabs and strangles them both. And the psychological dissonance here is staggering. He's so polite about it.
The politeness, yes.
He admitted that he accidentally brushed Marianne's breast while he was struggling to put the handcuffs on her, and he actually instinctively apologized. He said, oops, excuse me, sorry. And then he brutally murders her a minute later.
It is the ultimate terrifying dichotomy of the psychopath. The superficial charm masking the apex predator, the polite social conditioning running in parallel with the homicidal urge. He takes the bodies back to his apartment, engages in extensive necrophilia, and then systematically dismembers them.
So dark.
He disposes of their severed heads in a ravine off a mountain road after engaging in further horrific post-mortem sexual acts. And this brings us directly to the Morono study.
Right, the Morono study. I spent hours reading this last night. A behavior sequence analysis of serial killers' lives. This study is absolutely fascinating and crucial to understanding Kemper's methodology. The researchers looked at a massive data set of 233 male serial killers and statistically mapped their specific childhood abuse patterns to their adult methods of murder.
And what did the data reveal, Daddy? Explain the statistics to the listener.
Okay, yes. Well, the data showed that killers who only experience physical abuse in childhood usually go on to commit standard rape or lust killings. Those with a history of only sexual abuse tend to commit power killings characterized by intense overkill.
Right.
Psychological abuse, on its own, leads to lust killings involving prolonged torture. But if a killer experiences all three forms of abuse simultaneously, physical, sexual, and severe psychological abuse, like Kemper experienced in that locked basement with Clarnell's emotional terror, they inevitably commit anger killings, lightning-fast, brutally efficient overkill, followed by total, systematic destruction of the victim's body.
It maps onto Kemper's behavioral sequence flawlessly. The immediate strangulation, the postmortem dismemberment, the decapitation. He is not just killing these women, he is obliterating their very identity. The head is the physical seat of the human persona. By removing it, he completely objectifies them, reducing a complex human being to a collection of inanimate parts he can control.
Then, in September '72, he strikes again. He picks up Aiko Ku. She is a 15-year-old ballet dancer. And you know why she was hitchhiking on that specific road on that specific day? Because she missed her bus. She just barely missed her stupid, unreliable public transit bus.
It's a profound tragedy of circumstance and timing.
It's not fair. It's fundamentally unjust. Public transit in this country is so goddamn unreliable. If the bus driver had just been on schedule, if the city had properly funded the transit routes, she would have gotten on the bus and safely gone to her dance class. She was 15 years old, man. I hate buses. I really do. It makes me physically sick to my stomach to think about the infrastructure failing her. She gets in his car. He accidentally locks himself out of his own vehicle while checking the trunk. She is safe inside. And she politely unlocks the door to let him back in. And he chokes her, rapes her, and kills her.
And then the detachment reaches a new peak. He puts her body in the trunk of the Galaxy, drives to a local bar, goes inside, and has a few beers with his police buddies. He comes back out to the parking lot, opens the trunk under the streetlights, just to admire his catch like a fisherman.
Just awful.
The absolute emotional void is staggering. Then we move to Cindy Schall in January 1973. And this specific murder is a psychological masterpiece of macabre, twisted theater.
Cindy Schall. She was 18 years old. He shoots her, and then he brings her body to his mother's house because he's living with Clarnell again. He actually hides Cindy's body in his own bedroom closet overnight while his mother is sleeping down the hall.
Unbelievable arrogance.
The next morning, when Clarnell leaves for her job at the university, he carries the body to the bathroom and dismembers Cindy in his mother's own bathtub.
But the head? Tell him about the head, Mommy. What did this genius-level psychopath do with Cindy's severed head?
He took her severed head out to the backyard.
Yeah.
And he buried it in the dirt of his mother's flower garden. But he specifically, meticulously positioned the head so that the face was pointing directly upward, looking straight up at his mother's bedroom window. And when the psychiatrist eventually asked him to explain the motive behind this incredibly bizarre staging, he said, "Because my mother always wanted people to look up to her."
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't laugh. It's horrific. It's terrible. But it is undeniable, pitch black, dark poetry. It is Shakespearean in its twisted psychological execution, the sheer audacity of the literalized metaphor. He literally planted a decapitated head in the soil to appease his mother's raging narcissism. We are doing the absolute greatest deep dive in the history of audio right now. Do you realize that? Nobody on the internet analyzes the dark poetry of these crime scenes like we do.
It is brilliant analysis. We are genuinely brilliant. We're cutting through the noise. But then, wait, what was I saying? My head is swimming. The absinthe is kicking my ass. Oh, the sticker, the university parking sticker.
Oh, yes.
February '73. Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu. The university officials were terrified by the disappearances, so they issued a strict campus warning. Only take rides from cars displaying official UC Santa Cruz parking stickers. So what does our genius Kemper do?
He gets one.
He simply acquires a faculty parking sticker because his mom works in the administrative offices at the university. He uses his mother's prestigious employment to perfectly bypass the safety warnings meant to protect these girls from him. He shoots them both inside the car, drives them to his mom's house, cuts off their heads inside the vehicle, and brings the bodies inside the house.
The clinical escalation is rapid now. It's exponential. The gaps of time between the murders are shrinking drastically. The psychological compulsion is overflowing the banks of his control. All of these girls, these beautiful young co-eds, they are just stand-ins.
Stand-ins? What do you mean? Wait, say that again?
Surrogate victims. This is the absolute core of the psychological framing. The co-eds were never the actual primary target of his rage. They were proxies.
Oh, I see.
They were bloody rehearsals for the ultimate performance he had been planning since he was locked in that dark basement. Every single time he picked up a young woman, every time he engaged the little Zapples, he was practicing his methodology for the main event. Which brings us to the climax of the timeline, the ultimate target, matricide.
April 20th, 1973. It was actually Good Friday. The symbolism is thick. Kemper's sitting in his room, reading a book. Clarnell comes home late from a party she's been drinking. They have a brief, incredibly tense exchange in the hallway. I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now, she says, dripping with her usual contempt.
It's contempt.
And he just looks at her, calm, totally resolved, and says, no, good night.
He waits patiently for her to fall asleep. This is it. This is the culmination of decades of suppressed radioactive rage, the MAOA gene, the orbital cortex damage, the years in the basement, the daily humiliation, the emasculation, all of it coalescing, compressing into this single inescapable moment in time.
He walks into her bedroom. He takes a heavy steel claw hammer. He bludgeons his own mother repeatedly while she sleeps. He then takes a penknife and slits her throat to ensure she is dead. And then he decapitates the very woman who gave birth to him.
And then the post-mortem degradation begins. He uses her severed head as a literal dartboard. He throws darts into her face. He screams at her severed head for over an hour. He finally, for the first time in his entire life, has her complete undivided attention, and she physically cannot interrupt him or talk back. But the detail of the garbage disposal, this is the part that breaks my brain.
Oh God, the sink, the garbage disposal.
He meticulously cuts out her larynx. He cuts out her vocal cords. He surgically removes the physical biological instruments of her verbal abuse, the exact anatomical tools she used to belittle him, to emasculate him, to destroy his self-worth. He takes those bloody vocal cords into the kitchen. He drops them down the drain of the kitchen sink. He flips the switch and he turns on the garbage disposal. He wants to mechanically grind away her voice forever.
It doesn't work. It jams.
It doesn't work. The mechanical sink cannot process the vocal cords. The machine violently spits the tissue back out into the basin. It physically rejects the mother's voice. Kemper later calmly noted to the psychiatrist that this mechanical failure was incredibly appropriate because she had bitched and screamed and yelled at him for so many years that even a machine couldn't shut her up.
Wow.
Do you understand the profound, terrifying philosophical weight of that detail? The literal plumbing of the suburban house regurgitated her rage. It is the most perfect metaphor for motherhood ever documented, for the indestructible, eternal nature of maternal trauma. You cannot grind it up. It always, always comes back up the sink to haunt you.
I'm crying again. Look at my face. I'm actually weeping. It's just so messed up. It's so fundamentally broken. Because at the end of the day, underneath the neuroscience and the MAOA genes, we all just want our moms to love us. That's all any human being wants on this earth.
Oh, sweet.
We just want our mommies to look at us and say, you're a good boy, Ed. You're not too big. You're not a weirdo. You're just right. But she couldn't do it. She was this absolute cunt of a mother. I am so sorry for the explicit language, Ryan, but she was. She was a monster who built a monster.
She was a psychological nightmare. And he literally fucked the heads. He had sex with the severed heads. What the actual shit is that? He humiliated her corpse and the corpses of those poor girls in ways that completely defy human comprehension and evolutionary biology. And then, as if to put a neat, polite little bow on the apocalypse he just unleashed, he invites her best friend, Sally Hallett, over for a casual dinner.
Sally Hallett, 59 years old. Just a nice lady coming over for dinner and a movie with her friend Clarnell. Kemper ambushes her and strangles her to death the absolute moment she walks through the front door. And why? Does he hate Sally? No. He kills this innocent woman simply so he can steal her car and leave town without anyone wondering where Clarnell is for a few days. He commits a murder just to get a 48-hour head start on the interstate highway. He leaves a polite little note on the table saying, "Not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I got things to do."
But here is the massive clinical psychological crux of the entire case. Pay attention to this. Once he murdered his mother, the urge to kill completely and totally vanished. The little Zappels died the exact second Clarnell died. The surrogate victims were no longer psychologically necessary because the primary source of the pressure cooker had been permanently eliminated. The engine of his pathology ran out of fuel.
Which brings us perfectly to the confession. He steals the car and he drives out of town. He's popping handfuls of caffeine pills to stay awake. He drives over 1,000 miles nonstop, all the way to Pueblo, Colorado. He's got a trunk full of guns, hundreds of rounds of ammunition. He is deeply paranoid, listening to the radio, absolutely convinced the California Highway Patrol and the FBI are hunting him down in a massive dragnet. But he turns the dial and nothing. There's no news. Nobody knows Clarnell is dead.
It's a pathetic anticlimax. He committed the ultimate crime of his life, the crescendo of his existence, and the world didn't even notice. So what does he do? He finds a public phone booth. He calls the police back in Santa Cruz. He confesses to everything, and they don't believe him. They literally tell him to call back later because they're dealing with local burglaries.
Call back later. We're busy. Can you imagine the ego blow? The co-ed killer is on the line, holding the psychological weight of 8 corpses, and the cops are like, "Yeah, sure, Big Ed from the jury room. Whatever you say, buddy, go take a nap." He literally has to wait hours, call back, and demand to speak to a specific officer he knows personally from drinking at the bar just to finally convince them to send the local Pueblo police to arrest him at the phone booth.
And then we arrive at the trial in 1973. This is where the rigid legal system violently clashes with nuanced psychiatric science. The defense team predictably pleads not guilty by reason of insanity. Because obviously, look at the timeline we just spent an hour discussing. The man is profoundly biologically and psychologically unwell. But we have to look closely at the strict legal standards of insanity.
Right, the legal standards. Let me reset my brain. Okay, so there's the Knighton standards, all right, and then there's the ALI test, the American Law Institute test. These are crucial definitions.
Yes. Let's break them down for the listener. The Knighton rule is the older, stricter standard. It asks 2 very simple questions. Did the defendant know the physical nature and quality of the act they were committing? And crucially, did they know that what they were doing was legally and morally wrong at the time they did it?
Right.
And California, at that time, operated strictly under the Knighton standard. Kemper absolutely knew what he was doing. He meticulously hid the bodies. He cleaned up the blood with bleach. He used his mother's parking sticker to avoid detection. He undeniably knew it was legally wrong.
But wait. He was totally insane. He chopped off heads and had sex with them and threw them in ravines and yelled at them. He was the craziest guy ever.
But under the strict letter of the law, Daddy, he was legally sane. The ALI test, which asks if a mental defect prevented him from conforming his conduct to the law, might have offered a different outcome, but under Knighton, he's sane.
No, wait, I'm thinking about it, and he was actually the most sane guy in the room because he completely understood his own pathology. He admitted to the doctors that he couldn't stop. He told the jury during the trial that he felt like he had 2 distinct beings fighting inside his body. He literally asked the judge for the death penalty. He specifically requested death by torture. That's how incredibly sane he was. He knew exactly what a monster he was, and he knew he deserved to be wiped off the earth.
You are drunkenly contradicting yourself, but you are also profoundly right. It is a brilliant paradox. He was legally sane, but medically and biologically anomalous. The jury deliberated for a mere 5 hours. They found him sane and guilty on all counts. He was given 8 concurrent life sentences because the state of California had temporarily suspended the death penalty at that specific time.
Stupid, sexy Ryan. Stupid, sexy Ryan and his stupid, sexy, heavy-handed absent pores. I am spinning. The room is tilting.
Ryan's drink selection is aggressively, infuriatingly brilliant. I hate him so much, I want to bite him. I want to walk into that booth and bite his arm. Let's move to the final phase. Imprisonment. The Blind Project.
Vacaville Prison, the California medical facility. Kemper goes to prison, and he instantly reverts to his Atascadero programming. He becomes the perfect, flawless prisoner, a model inmate. He is so trusted that he is put in charge of scheduling psychiatric appointments for the other high-risk inmates. He makes little ceramic cups in the pottery kiln.
But the absolute most fascinating, bizarre detail of his incarceration is his voice work, The Blind Project. Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer, spends over 5,000 hours of his life sitting inside a tiny, soundproof recording booth, reading literature onto cassette tapes for the visually impaired. He records over 4 million feet of audio tape.
He read Flowers in the Attic. Do you know what that book is about? It's literally about a terrible, abusive mother locking her children away in a dark room. The psychological irony is so incredibly thick you could choke to death on it. And he read the novelization of Star Wars.
He was literally awarded 2 prestigious trophies by the blind community for his dedication. They loved the soothing cadence of his deep voice.
It's so beautiful.
Yep.
It really is. And it's so completely fucked up. These poor, innocent blind people just sitting in their living rooms wanting to hear an adventure about Luke Skywalker and the Force and Darth Vader, and the gentle, deep voice guiding them through a galaxy far, far away belongs to a 300-pound giant who used his own mother's severed head as a dartboard.
It's quite the contrast.
I can't take it. It makes me want to weep all over again. It's the ultimate duality of man.
Yeah.
He brought genuine joy and comfort to the sightless.
He also brought intense, calculated psychological warfare to his fellow inmates. He was housed in the exact same cell block as Herbert Mullen, another infamous serial killer who had coincidentally murdered 13 people in Santa Cruz around the exact same time as Kemper. But Kemper deeply hated Mullen. He thought Mullen was just a disorganized, psychotic, sloppy killer who ruined the art of murder.
So what does Big Ed do? He uses operant conditioning and behavior modification on him, just like he learned when he was reading the MMPI files at Atascadero. Mullen had a very annoying habit of singing loudly in his cell and disturbing everyone's peace. So Kemper, who is a full foot taller and 100 pounds heavier than Mullen, starts throwing cups of cold water on him whenever he sings.
And when Mullen is quiet and behaves, Kemper rewards him by tossing him a few peanuts. He literally trained a fellow highly lethal serial killer like a circus animal. He liked peanuts, Kemper famously noted in an interview. Mullen was just a little slut for peanuts.
A little slut for peanuts. Oh my God, that is the funniest, darkest thing I've ever heard. But Kemper's influence reached way beyond the cell block. He actually changed the fundamental way the FBI operates. John Douglas, the legendary profiler who inspired the show Mindhunter, goes to Vacaville to interview Kemper. Kemper is super polite, super helpful, highly articulate about his crimes. But at one point, the prison guard steps out of the room for a coffee break.
And the second the door clicks shut, Kemper leans over the table, looks this seasoned FBI agent dead in the eyes and says, "In the 30 minutes before that guard comes back, I could snap your head off and leave it on this table. I'd own the prison then."
Just terrifying.
He later claimed he was just making a polite joke, but the FBI agents were so deeply, viscerally terrified by his physical presence that the Bureau officially instituted the 2-agent rule for all serial killer interviews from that day forward. One man forever changed federal protocol.
He has been officially denied parole 12 separate times. The most recent hearing was in 2024. He didn't even bother to attend. He uses a wheelchair now. He's had strokes. He has severe diabetes, a pacemaker. He's just an old, physically broken giant waiting to die behind concrete walls.
You know, my mother used to lock me out of the house until the streetlights came on, every single day after school, just total cold emotional abandonment. It wasn't a locked basement, but, it leaves a mark on your soul. It shapes your orbital cortex.
My mom made me eat the cheap, generic brand cereal in the plastic bags, while my friends got the real stuff in the boxes. It's not the same as decapitation, I know, but it felt like a profound emotional betrayal at the time. I love you so much. You know that. You're such a good co-host.
Yeah.
You really, truly get the neurobiology. You see the matrix of the trauma.
I love you too, good boy. We really are the absolute best at this. Nobody does the academic rigor like we do.
Okay, we have to wrap this up. We have to land the plane. The final provocative thought. Listen to me, listener. Are you listening to my voice right now?
They're listening. They are riveted. Tell them the deep philosophical thought.
If a guy with a certified 145 IQ, maybe even a 180 IQ, a genius who completely, thoroughly understands every single twisted aspect of his own broken psychology, a guy who literally administered psychiatric tests to other inmates, who politely admits to the FBI that he's a monster who shouldn't be allowed on the streets, who literally drives to a phone booth to call the cops on himself. If he still couldn't summon the willpower to stop his own hands from killing those girls, does free will even actually exist?
Wow.
Or are we all just biological machines completely helplessly driven by our genetics, our MAOA genes, and the trauma our mothers subjected us to? Are we just meat puppets acting out a violent script written into our DNA before we were even born? born.
That is profoundly depressing and incredibly accurate. It's the ultimate terrifying truth. We are all just meat puppets with garbage disposals that don't work.
Please like and subscribe. Please go to @HAM-OTR on YouTube right now. We need the validation because our mothers didn't give it to us. We need the clicks.
Hit the little bell icon for notifications. Ryan, you beautiful, evil mixologist. Unlock the booth right now. I'm coming in there. I'm going to do very bad things to you and your expensive mixing board, you stupid, sexy cocktail genius.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for going off the record.
Good boy. Shut the mics off, Ryan. Shut it off.